Welcome. Please join me for a brief tour of mental health policy in Canada, England, and Guatemala. In Canada, segregation of people deemed mentally ill goes back to Confederation with the cross-country opening of lunatic asylums. Those who displayed the abnormal behavior were feared and isolated. Provincial legislation such as the BC Insane Asylums Act allowed doctors to unilaterally certify patients as insane and lock them away in residential facilities. Behind these walls, treatment was often inhumane. Padded cells, electroshock therapy, and overmedication were commonplace. Women were a particularly vulnerable group, having disproportional representation in asylums. Even outside the asylums, they were often viewed as emotional, hysterical, or excitable. In the 1960s and 70s, Valium was touted as the popular way to reduce anxiety and keep the little lady calm so that the 1975 movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest brought the problems of institutionalization to the forefront of public attention. Jack Nicholson's portrayal of McMurphy showed the inmates as real people with hopes, dreams, and feelings that were, when expressed, ran smack up against the control of the traditional. The 1977 Canadian Human Rights Act was enacted to ensure equality of opportunity and freedom from discrimination under protected grounds such as race, sex, and disability, either mental or physical. The provinces and territories have all enacted similar legislation. In the ensuing years, asylum patients were slowly released back into the community, where public reaction ranged from ambivalence to hostility. Despite legislation, stigmatization led to discrimination in housing, work, and social connections. Vast numbers of these people ended up on the street, creating a new social problem. Deinstitutionalization shaped the contours of mental health care in Canada. Outpatient services increased. Families took on the burden of caregiving, and social workers took on a greater role. In 2006, the State Standing Committee issued its report entitled Out of the Shadows at Last on the findings of its investigation of mental health in Canada. Shockingly, the report found that Canada was the only G8 country without a national mental health strategy, and that the Senate Committee's report was the first national report on mental health. One of the report's recommendations was the creation of a commission to act as a catalyst for change. In August 2007, the Prime Minister announced the creation of the Mental Health Commission of Canada. Over the next decade, the Commission's mandate is to focus attention, dialogue, and action to ensure that mental health stays out of the shadows forever. The federal government has committed $50 million a year to fund this work. In September 2010, Bell Canada's CEO George Cope added mental health to the corporate agenda by pledging $50 million over 5 years to support mental health in Canada. The effort is focused on 4 pillars: anti-stigma, improved care and access, research, support, and new workplace initiatives. Bell's spokesperson, Olympic speed skating gold medalist Clara Hughes, has come forward to speak about her 2-year experience with depression. Most recently, Bell's Let's Talk Day on February 9th raised $3.3 million towards mental health initiatives. Guatemala has only recently come through a brutal 30-year civil war, where an underestimated 300,000 people were killed or disappeared. Many of the survivors suffer post-traumatic stress disorder, and large numbers of children show signs of agitation and are having trouble focusing and sleeping. The consequences of war have exacerbated problems such as chronic violence, alcoholism, and drug abuse. In a country where 75% of the population lives in poverty, mental health care has not been a government priority. The national mental health system has serious limitations, especially in primary care, marked by lack of qualified human resources. Budget allocations for mental health care are barely 1% of the total health care budget, and the National Psychiatric Hospital, as the nation's capital, consumes at least 90% of those funds. In Guatemala, women have also been a particularly vulnerable group. Historically, young women were sent to convents, where once they entered, they were never allowed to leave. The ruins of Capuchina's convent in Antigua gives clue to what their existence was like, with small cells in the basement where demented nuns were isolated. 60% of Guatemala's population is indigenous Mayan and lives in rural areas. 95% are illiterate and most live in poverty. The people see living in traditional ways with traditional beliefs and rituals as important for honoring their ancestors. This can make social change difficult. Those with mental disabilities are often shunned and even beaten, left to their own devices to live in isolation and poverty. Health care of any sort is difficult for these people to access. As a consequence, the Guatemalan healthcare system relies heavily on foreign assistance. Abandoned by their families, the severely handicapped are often locked away in missionary hospitals such as Hermano Pedro in Antigua. Foreign volunteers provide much of the contact and care. England is a world leader in mental health care. Their publicly funded healthcare system, the National Health Service, was founded in 1928 with the ambition to bring good health care to all. England is currently throwing big dollars at mental health with a current annual budget of £77 billion. On February 1, 2011, Nick Clegg, the Deputy Prime Minister, announced that the government was targeting £400 million to improve access to modern psychological talking therapies, such as cognitive behavioral therapy. Times Change is England's most ambitious program against discrimination faced by people with mental health problems. The program has the goal to tackle the stigma existing within people's knowledge, attitudes, and behavior towards mental health. Their target is to achieve a 5% positive shift in attitudes, as well as a 5% reduction in discrimination levels. They are doing this by launching a very public campaign, such as Eric's dating and flat sharing experiment, which includes extensive media coverage of the results showing significant discrimination and stigmatization towards mental health disorders. England's leading mental health charities, Mind and Rethink, are running the Times Change program, funded with £16 million from the Big Lottery Fund and £4 million from Comic Relief. The program is being evaluated by the Institute of Psychiatry at King's College London. 18 months into the campaign, they are already measuring positive improvements. To aid the movement, celebrities such as comedic actor Stephen Fry are coming forward with their stories. Extensive media coverage appears to be helping the anti-stigma movement in England make a positive